Hello guys, I'm back again to continue our work in creating this water tank, but this time I want to give it some texture. For doing that I will use Substance Painter, but before using Substance Painter we must unwrap all the model because Substance Painter only supports models with unwrapping data. And as you saw in previous session, I gave my model parts, some of my model parts unwrapping data. Before exporting this model as FBX or OBJ, I will unwrap other parts which I didn't unwrap them in previous session. So let's start our work. For starting, let's open material editor and select all the objects and give the first material to the objects. And I want a checker map in diffuse channel, so let's click on the diffuse and select checker, and for example set the tiling to something like 15 by 15 and enable the show shaded material in viewport to be shown in viewport. Okay, it's good. As you see, some parts of the object have a good unwrapping data. For example, this part have a good one because the checkers are fully quad and very good. But some parts of the models have a stretch checker, like the cylinder in the center of the water tank, and this means this part doesn't have a good unwrapping data, and I must unwrap it again. So let's select this cylinder and click on Alt and Q to isolate my selection, and for that I will click on unwrapping UVW map for unwrapping that. And as you see, when I clicked on unwrap UVW map, some automatic UV seams is shown here. Sometimes you don't need these automatic seams, you want your own seams and you want to delete these automatic seams. For doing that, first you will delete the unwrap UVW map, and then first you give UVW mapping clear modifier and give an unwrap UVW map again. And as you see, we don't have those automatic seams. Alright, now it's time to give the model my own seams. For doing that, I will open UV editor. I will go to polygon and select the up and down polygons, and in the tools I will click on break. I'm going to edge, select one of my edges, click on loop, and in explode I will click on break again. Now it's time to click on quick peel. When I click my quick peel, whole the cylinder is unwrapped, but I need to pack it. So let's select all the parts, and in the tools let's click on pack UVs and click on OK. There we have my unwrapped cylinder. Okay, convert it to editable poly and isolate that, and let's go up and select this part. This part has stretched UVs again. Let's give it and UVW mapping clear, and let's give it an unwrap UVW map. Let's select up and down polygons, open UV editor, in the tools click on break, and let's select one of the edges, clicked on break and explode, and it's time to click on quick peel. Select all the parts, and in the tools let's click on pack UV. There we go. Convert it to editable poly again and isolate that. Select these parts. This part has stretch UVs again. Isolate that. Unwrap UVW map, open UV editor. The easiest way to unwrapping these parts is to select all the parts, going to mapping and click on flatten mapping. The default parameters is good hiding, and click on OK. Alright, it's done. Convert it to editable poly again and select the cylinder below that, and Alt Q to isolate that. And I want some unwrap UVW map again. I don't want these automatic seams and I must to add an UVW mapping layer, but this time I don't want to use UVW mapping layer. I want to show you another way to delete your automatic seams. For doing that, you will convert your model to editable mesh, not editable poly. Keep in mind. Let's convert your model to editable mesh. Going to utility, and here let's go and select more, and here select UVW remove, and then click on UVW to remove your UVW mapping information. And let's convert it to editable poly again and unwrap your model. Here you don't have any seams again. Alright, open your UV editor again and select the up and down polygons in the same way, and click on break, right click and click on break to break that. And let's select one of the edges and click on loop, and again break that, and let's quick peel it. There we go. Select all the parts. In the tools, click on pack UV. There it is. Convert it to editable poly again and isolate that. Alright, the job is done good. Now let's go here in this part. Let's select this tube, Alt and Q, UVW mapping layer, unwrap UVW map again, select the edges, this edge, while holding Control, selecting this edge, and I think it's okay. Click on loop, select this edge, or any edge you want. For example, you want to you can select this edge, or one of the edges that create a ring with that. I will select this edge and click on loop, and now I will click on convert edge selection to seams. Now I have seams from my edge selections. It's time to click on quick peel, and I have a good unwrapping data now. Click on convert to editable poly and isolate, and now let's select this tube, and again UVW mapping layer, unwrap UVW map, select one of your edges, click on loop, and go and select on quick peel. Oh, excuse me. First you must select your edge, click on loop, and you must convert your edge selections to seams. There we go. Now I have seam, and I can click on quick peel. There it is. And clicked on convert to editable poly. And in the ladder, let's select all these elements, because I think it doesn't have a good UV. Detach them and delete all the elements and just keep one of them. There it is. Isolate that for working easier. UVW mapping layer, unwrap UVW map, open UV editor, select polygon first, open UV editor, select your polygons in the start and end of the cylinder, and here in the tools, let's click on break, select this edge, click on break again, and it's time to click on quick peel. And let's select all the parts and pack UV. Alright, now I have a good unwrapping. There it is. And move the pivot in the center of my cylinder. So let's go to here and click on affect pivot only and click on center to object. Okay, let's end isolate. Select this ladder. And I want to duplicate this cylinder in Z axis to form the ladder. For that, I will select that, click on tool, go to array, and here I will click on preview and set the parameters of Z to something like -37 and the count to 10. I want copy because I want to attach them all together, and click on OK. And here I will attach them all together. There we go. Alright, the unwrapping process is done. Now it's time to separate my models part by adding different IDs to each part of my models. For example, I will select this part and I will attach all the girders here. Let's change my material. I don't need checker anymore. Alright. Okay, let's select and attach all the girders here. I think here, let's attach it to that and that. And maybe these ones. Alright, good. And I will give them the material ID of 1 and open material editor, create another multi-sub-object material, keep old material as sub-material, it's good. Give this material to my selected girders. Alright, good. Now let's select these ones. I think it's enough. I don't want to attach them to any other object, so let's add a material of 2 to that. Give it now they have the ID of 2. Let's copy this material to the ID of 2 and change the color of that. I think it's green is good, and give the material to that. Alright. And this one is enough. Change the material ID to 3. Copy the material to the ID of 3 and change the color to something like yellow, I think, and give it to that. And let's select all these parts and attach them all together. Attach, excuse me, this one, again and again. Alright, good. Let's give it the ID of 4 and give it a material with the color of, I think, something like that. Alright, and let's attach all of them together. Good. And give them the ID of 5. And here's another material for the ID of 5. Now, I gave several parts of models different IDs and different materials, because when you want to import your model in Substance Painter, There you have two ways. One way is to use several materials for your parts. If all your UVs are in the same UV space, for example, all my UVs are in the UV space of 0 0, so I will give the parts several materials for fixing that. And the other way is to add each of your object UVs several UV spaces. In other way, you give UDIM to your work and use UDIM for your work. And now my model is ready to export. So let's select all of my model and click on export selected. Excuse me, I forgot something. Before exporting your model, you must repack your UVs. Alright, so select the ID of one, add another unwrap UVW map, open UV editor, select all of them, tools, pack UV. Alright, it's okay. Click on convert to editable poly. Another one, unwrap UVW map, open UV editor, select all of them, click on pack UV. Some part of my models is not attached, so let's attach them together. Give it the material of 5 again. And unwrap it again. Pack UV it again. Alright, it's good. Convert it to editable poly. Select that. Unwrap it. Open UV editor. Click on OK. And let's select this part. Unwrap UVW map. Open UV editor. And again pack UV and click on OK. And select these ones. Pack UV, clicked on OK. Alright, it's good. And convert to editable file again. Select all the models. Go to export and export selected. And I will save my work as water tank FBX, and the type is FX is good. Clicked on save, and I think the default parameters is good for that, and clicked on OK. I have some errors here. It gives me FBX doesn't support some materials. Because as you see here, FBX doesn't support this material of 2, because FBX doesn't support V-Ray material. If you want to export your model in FBX, change your model type to standard materials. So let's change them all to standard. So let's click on that, rename it on Mat1, Mat01, and change the shader to standard. Select another one, name it Mat02, and change it to standard, and give it another color. And this one, Mat03, standard, and another color. Matte 04, standard, again another color, all the color must be different, and matte 05, standard, and give it its color. Okay, now select all the objects, give the material to the object again, rename the material to water tank. Now I clicked on export, export selected, and re-export it on water tank FBX, save, replace it, clicked on OK. And as you see, I have no error here now. And all the materials are supported by FBX format. Okay, the working in 3D Max is done and the model is ready to import it in Substance Painter. So we will open Substance Painter and import our model in that and start our painting process. Alright, let's begin our work. Here we are in Substance Painter, the most useful, powerful and user-friendly software for painting and texturing objects. Let's start our work. I will go to File and click on New to open the new project. We have some options here that I want to describe some of them. For example, template specifies the texturing system I want to use, and by default it's on PBR metallic roughness, which means if I export my textures after painting my model in the final step in Substance Painter, it will give me metalness and roughness maps, and I can use these maps in shaders that supports metallic and roughness, and for example, like 3D Studio Max Physical Material, that is a shader which added to 3D Studio Max since 2017 version, I think. And it supports PBR metallic roughness, and for example, if you want to use in Unreal Engine, Unreal supports PBR metallic roughness. And if you want to use your maps in shaders like V-Ray materials, you must change your template because V-Ray don't support metallic roughness system. For example, you must select PBR specular glossiness system. And as you see, we have other options here, for example, Unity 5 or Unreal Engine 4. And because I want to work with physical material of 3D Max, I will choose metallic roughness. And in File, I must select the model I exported from Max, so I will import water tank FBX. In import setting, I have two options. One is create a texture set per UDIM tile. As I mentioned before, we have two ways to import our model to Substance Painter. One is to store UVs of the objects in several U dimensions, and the other is to add several materials and material IDs. And because I have all my all my UVs in 0, U dimension, so I gave my object several materials by a multi-sub object, and I must not check this checkbox because I don't use several UDIMs. I don't want to import my cameras. In project setting document resolutions shows the resolution of maps I am working with. And Substance Painter is a fully procedural texturing system, which means whenever I want to change the resolution of my maps, for example, whenever I want to change the resolution from 1K to 2K, I can do that. And if I change the resolution to higher values, you can see the enhancement of details in the textures. And it's fully procedural, so I'm not afraid of setting these parameters, and I leave it as it is for now. And I have two kind of normal map format. One is DirectX and the other is OpenGL. The only difference between DirectX and normal map and OpenGL during computations is their z-axis. One is toward up and the other is toward down, and you must see what types of normal map your software supports. For example, 3D Max supports DirectX, and I leave it on DirectX as it is, and I clicked on OK. Alright, when I load my model, I see I have some chaos on the model and see some objects are not in their right place. That's because when I was modeling in 3D Studio Max, I used some tools like Scale. Scale is a X-form tool. What it means, what X-form means, let me show you in 3D Max. So let's open 3D Max and let me create a box, create a cube, for example, with the dimension of 20 by 20 by 20, and let me scale it and make it twice bigger. So when I make it twice bigger, you expect the length, width and height becomes 40 by 40 by 40. So let me do that. Let me select that, click on scale, right click on scale and make it twice bigger. But as you see, the measurements, the measure doesn't change. And they will remain on 20 by 20 by 20 because scale is a X form, and this is the meaning of X form. Because during modeling I scale some part of my models, and the scale is a X form tool, I must reset all the X forms before I export my model to Substance Painter. So I will select all my model and go to utility, and then here is an option called reset X form. So I will select that, and in reset transform I will click on reset selected. When I reset my selection, some part of my object becomes black. This means these parts have inverted normals and their normals are not in right directions, and I must invert them to be on the right side. For doing that, I will select my objects that are black and give them a normal modify. So in the modify list, I give a normal modify. Let me add a normal modify, as you see. Okay, it's now correct. I will select this, add normal again, select this one, and add normal again. And as you see, all the objects are correct. So I will select them again and convert them to editable poly again and export them again. Export on water tank FBX, yes, and click on OK. And let me go to Substance Painter and re-import it. So I will go to File, New, select water tank, and I leave all the parameters as they are, and click on OK. Discard. Alright, everything are in the right position and the model loads correctly. So it's time to texturing, but before texturing and painting on model, I have a process in Substance Painter called baking. Baking is a process to extract data from 3D object in a space and store them in a 2D map. For example, normal map, curvature map, ambient occlusion map, word space normal, thickness map, position map, they are created from the baking process. And I must bake my model if I want to have a nice and correct painting in Substance Painter. So the first thing you must keep in mind in Substance Painter after loading your model is baking. For baking my model, I will go to texture set setting window here, and there is an option here, mesh maps, bake mesh maps. When I clicked on bake mesh maps and baking window opens, we have two kinds of parameters here. One is common, which is common for all the maps, and the other is a specific, which is specific for all the maps. Normal should have its own parameter or ID or ambient occlusion, but in common tab, output size is a common. Output size controls the size of the map that is baking. For example, it's by default 1K, and I think it's good for now. If I set it on higher values, the baking process will be done with a slower speed. So I will leave it on 1K, And if I have a high definition of this model, for example, I have a high poly of this model, I must load this in high definition mesh part. Clicked on this, I'll load my model if I have. But because I haven't a high poly of this mesh, I will check this checkbox, use low poly mesh as high poly mesh. And I don't want to describe these parameters because we don't need them anymore. If I click on normal hasn't any specific parameters. Word space normal 2. ID is a map for selecting my elements in this scene in Substance Painter. Easier, but because I haven't set my IDs in 3D Studio Max, and I cannot have ID when I clicked on a bake mesh maps now, so I will uncheck this. And here we have ambient occlusion. For example, secondary rays controls the quality of your ambient occlusion map. Curvature, we have details, controls the quality of your curvature map. And we have a main parameters called algorithm, which are two kinds. One is per pixel and the other is per vertex. When you have a high definition of this mesh, for example, you have a high poly of this mesh and you load it in common in this place, you must set this algorithm on per pixel, because per pixel extracts curvature data from the normal map. And when you haven't, you can change it to per vertex. Per vertex extract curvature data from the mesh itself. Alright, and I will click apply to all so that my changing in algorithm will be applied to all my texture sets. So I will click apply to all, and I don't need thickness, because usually thickness map is used in creating SSS effects, and because I don't have any SSS in these textures, I will make it unchecked and click on bake all texture sets and wait for my textures and maps to be baked. Alright, the baking is done. Now it's time to have some texturing. But before texturing, I will explain a little bit about the parameters that is related to painting and texturing. One is texture sets list. Here we have, as you see in texture set list, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 texture sets. As you see, their names, they are matte 01, matte 2, 3, 4, 5. And as you see in 3D Studio Max, and when I open Material Editor, as you see in my material, I have matte 01, matte 02, 3, 4, 5. They are with the names that I gave the model, as you see. And each of these textures, each of these texture sets consists of some part of my models. For example, matte 01 consists of, if I click solo, these girders, and matte 02 these parts, matte 03 these parts, 4 and 5, as you see. And if I clicked on all the objects will be shown. You must first specify which part of the model you want to paint, and then select the texture set of that objects. For example, if I want to paint on these girders, I must select the matte 01, because these girders are the subset of matte 01. Okay, so this is the rule of texture set list. The other thing I want to describe is I will use materials in the shelf for texturing my scene. As you see, the shelf subset, we have an option called materials, and when you click on materials, you have some default materials in your shelf. Most of these materials are Substance Painter default. These are full procedural materials that are created in Substance Designer, and import it in Substance Painter, and you can create your own material in Substance Designer, because the Substance Designer is a very powerful software to create full procedural materials. Another option we will use is a smart material. When you combine, for example, two or more materials of these default materials, and combine them, and using some smart mask and using some generators to create a new material with new property, you can save them in smart materials. So you can create these materials in Substance Painter itself by combining materials and using masks and generators. The other thing we will use is smart masks. They are some masks created by combining several generators in Substance Painter, and you can create your own smart mask. Masks is used for combining above layer with below ones, and as you see, there are several procedural masks here that will help you to have a good texturing. So the other thing I want to describe is layer window. All your painting, all your materials will be done in layer window. If you work with Photoshop, you see layer window in Substance Painter is much like the layers in Photoshop. You can create your new layer which are by default empty layers, and you can paint on them. You can create some fill layers that I will describe a little bit later. You can create some groups and put your layers into a group. You can delete a layer by clicking on this recycle bin. You can mask your layer which layers with each other. For example, if you clicked on mask, you have 4 options. One is white mask, one is black mask, bitmap mask, and add mask with color selections. If you had ID map baked, you could use add mask with color selections, but if you haven't, you can use the other three options here. White mask, let me describe them later. And these are some filters and generators you can use that I won't explain them more. And let me explain a little about add a layer and add a fill layer. When you clicked add a layer, an empty layer like this will be added to your layer window. And if when you clicked on this layer to activate that, you have some tools here. For example, brush tool to paint your material on your texture sets. For example, when I clicked on this brush tool, I have the properties of this brush in this window. As you see, I have a white material here. My form of brush is something like that. If you paint on this, you can test your brush here, and you can change your properties of your brush. For example, you can change the size of your brush, flow, stroke opacity, spacing, and the other options, and size jitter and the other things. And you can change your brush alpha in alpha part by clicking on this and select your own brush alpha. For example, I will select on that, and as you see, I have another alpha for my brush. And you can change the hardness, form of the shape, and there are some shortcuts for your brush. For example, if you hold Ctrl on the keyboard and hold the right mouse button and move up and down, you can control the hardness of your brush. If you hold Ctrl and hold right mouse button and move left and right, you can change the size of your brush. If you hold Ctrl and hold left mouse button and move up and down, you can rotate your brush. And if you hold Ctrl and hold the left mouse button and moving left and right, moving the mouse left and right, you can control the flow of your brush. These are some shortcuts of the brush that will help you to paint efficiently. Okay, the other options here is stencil. You can add some stencil to your brush. For example, I will show you. But before I will describe the material part. The other one is material. You can change the form of your material. For example, you can change the color of that by changing the color of base color. For example, I can change it, or you can give it a map. All right, okay, a uniform color is enough for describing. You can give some height to your material, and you can change your roughness of your material. For example, if you moving the roughness towards black, you have a more glossy material, and if you move it towards white, you have a matte and less glossy material. Alright, you can change the metalness of your material, metalness properties to show if your material is dielectric black or full metallic white. Alright, you can control the metallic form, for example metallic, and you can paint it. As you see, I am painting on my girders, which are in the texture set list of Matte 01. Alright, and this is you can okay, I promise to describe the stencil. You can specify a stencil for your brush. For example, let me specify a stencil. If you give a stencil, for example this one, your form of a brush is like a stencil, which means when you start to paint on this stencil, the black parts won't be painted and the white parts will be painted. Some shortcuts and controlling the stencil is when you hold S and holding the right mouse button and moving the mouse. It not matter that you move towards up and down or left and right. You can change the size of the stencil. When you are holding S and holding the middle mouse button and moving the mouse, you can move the stencil place. And when you hold the S and the left mouse button and start to moving the mouse, you can rotate the stencil. And let me show you, for example, if I put this stencil here and start to paint, I have the form of my stencil. Okay, I don't need it anymore. The other options of layers is add a fill layer. If you clicked add a fill layer, a uniform color will be added to hold the objects in texture set list of Matte 01. That is by default gray, and you can change the color of that in the properties field. And when you add a fill layer, and as you see in the tools here, you have all your tools disabled and cannot use them. You can, for example, combine the fill layer with the layer below by masks. For example, if I go to a smart mask and choose one of these masks, for example surface worn, and drag and drop on the above layer here and leave it. As you see, I have nothing here by default. If I clicked on my mask and click the subset of the mask, which is mask editor, I have their parameters here. For example, I have the global balance. If I change it, I can control the form of the mask. And you can right click and remove your mask and add another mask. And you must try several masks to see which is suitable for you. Okay. By default, when you add a fill layer to your scene, you cannot paint. But for example, if you add a filter here, add effect, excuse me. If you select your fill layer, add an effect, And here we have add paint. If I add a paint, I can now paint on my fill layer. Alright, I think it's enough for description of tools, and because it's not the basic of Substance Painter, and I just want to show you how to paint such this object. So let's start our work. For the beginning, I will select metal 1, these girders. I want some steel material for them, so I will go to smart materials and look for steel. Here, steel rust. I think it's good. And drag and drop on the layers window. And as you see, I have a good rust steel in the girders. Alright. It's enough for now. Let's choose the matte O2 texture sets. And matte O2 is for these objects. I think steel rust is good for them, so I will drag and drop in the layers part. And as you see, everything is fine, and I don't need this empty layer, so I will delete that. Okay, good. And Matto 3, let's go to Matto 3, and Matto 3 is for these girders again, and I think steel rust is good for it now, so I will give it another steel rust to that. And let me change the form of the rust in the steel of the matte O2 objects. So let's select matte O2 and open the folder, and here's the rust. I will find the rust, clicked on the mask and see the subset of the mask, and clicked on this mask editor, and here I have some parameters. I will change it. I want more rust and more contrast, for example, something like that. And I can change the color of my steel. For example, if I go to base metal and click on that, I can change the base color of that, like this. And I can change the resolution of my textures. As you see, it's some kind of blur. And if I go to texture setting here, I have the size that is by default 1K, so I will change it to 2K, and as you see, I have more sharper and a texture with more details here, and this is the meaning of fully procedural texturing in Substance Painter. Alright, good. Let's go to texture set list, and let's choose the matte O4 objects. Alright, and I will give another material to that. For example, I will give a steel painted to them, something like that, but not with this color. I want to change the red color here, so I will open the folder and I find the paint color. I will click on the color and change the base color, for example, to something like white or maybe black. I think black is good, or dark gray. And let's change the form of the paint on the steel. So let's go to here and let's see metal details. I will click on dirt and change the histogram position. It's better. Add histogram contrast, and let's go to base metal. Here's the base metal. I think it's good by default. Let's go to paint. Let's click on the mask. Let's go to the mask editor subset, and let's change the parameters, for example, the global balance or contrast or maybe some textures, and let's play with the parameters. I think it's good. Alright, good for now. Let's go to the other texture set list, Mat05, and I have these objects in Mat05, and I will give them a machinery material. So I will select machinery and give them to Mat05 objects. I have something like that. I don't want this yellow color, so I will open the folder and find the metal base color and change the color of that. For example, I will change it to something dirtier. Something, for example, like this, or we can change it to good. I think it's good. And let's control the amount of rust. So I will select rust layer and select the mask part and go to mask editor and change the parameters of the rust. Good. Alright, it's awesome. Very nice. I want this material for this body, for up this body, for the ladders, but I don't want this material for the cylinder in the center of the water tank, and I don't want this material for the tubes here. So I must mask this machinery material. Let me mask that. I will select the folder of machinery, click on mask, and give a white mask. If you give a white mask, I have a fully white color for the mask of this machinery folder. White means when you give a white mask to some objects, means that I want this material to be done to hold the objects, but I want some part of these objects have other materials, so I don't want this material to be done to hold the objects. I want, for example, the UV parts of this tube in the center and these tubes be black here. For doing that, I can select mask and select the paint tool and change the color of material to black like this, and start to paint. You see, something like that. But there is an easier way. For doing it with easier way, I will go here to polygon field. Clicked on polygon field. We have some properties for the polygon field. You can select your object by their triangles, or by their polys, or by their elements, that is mesh fill. And I think this is the easiest way to select and mask your object. So I will click on mesh fill. I change the color to black because I want to make this center cylinder and these tubes to black, and select these objects, as you see. Alright, now I want another material for them. For example, let me see what I have here. For example, old iron. Let me try old iron. Not bad. Good. But as you see, when I gave old iron to this part, hold the Mat05 texture set list became with the material of old iron. I can move it to down. or I can leave it on up here and mask it again. For masking that, I will click on black mask and select the mesh fill and click on select the mesh fill and make the color white and select them. Alright, good. Let me add some more details to my materials. So let's add some dirts on these girders. So let me select matte 01, and here I have dirt material in a smart material parts, and I will give it to all the girders to have some dirt on these girders, as you see. And let me change the dirt base mask. Here I will change that. Good. And let me change the size of my textures. So I will go to texture set setting and give it a 2K texture size for having more details, as you see. Good. And let me add some more details to this texture. So I will go here to texture set list and select the matte 05, and here change the size of these textures. So I will change the size to 2K. Better now. And I want some dust on this body. So I will go to machinery folder here, and in the folder in the maximum part of the layers, I will create a fill layer. There we go. And I leave the color of this fill layer as it is. I will make it gray. Good. But I want to be more rough, so I will change the roughness of this fill layer. I will make it more rough. Alright. And now I want a smart mask for that, so I will go to smart masks, and here I will surface rust, for example, or surface worn. Let's give it surface worn, for example. Alright, let's change the mask editor parameters. Surface worn is not good. I will delete this layer mask and select another one. For example, I will select dust subtle and give it to the fill layer. Yeah, it's better now. Let's change the mask editor parameters. Good. And let's add a little bit contrast. Better now. It's more better. And the other thing is I don't want this color of the body be so shiny. So I will go to metal base and change the roughness of the body. Alright, good. Alright. The other thing is to add some rust to this iron. So I will go to iron old folder, and I will add a material. I will click on material, and I will find here I will find rust fine and give it to the maximum place of the layers. Alright, I have something like that, and I will give it a smart mask again. For example, I will add some subtle scratch. Let me give it to that to have some scratch, and let's change its parameters of the mask. So I will select mask, I will select metal edge wear subset here and change the wear level. Better now. Okay, better. And one more trick. I will teach you one more trick for painting snow. If you want some snow on this model, you can create a new layer. So let me create some snow on the girders. So I will click matte 01, and above I will create a fill layer, change its color to white as you see, and I think roughness is good for the snow, and give it some height. Good. And let me show you. Let me add a filter to the color. So I will go to here and add a filter, and in the filter I will select excuse me, I will select material finished grainy to have some grain. I can change its scale. I think it's good. And I can change the grain intensity. Good. And then I will add a mask to this color. For example, surface warm. Alright. Let's go to mask editor and change the global balance to have some snow. Alright. And I want some parts not to have a snow. For example, these parts must not have a snow. So I will add select mask. I will go to effect and add paint, and add a paint effect to the mask. Now it's time to paint the parts I don't need to black. So I will change the material color to black, something like that. Scale it to change the scale of that, and start to paint the places that you don't want. And you can change the off of your paint too. Let me select, for example, this one. No, it's not good. Let me select this one. Alright. Good. Alright, let me add some snow on the body. So let's select the matte 05 and repeat this process. Give a fill layer, make it white. I think the roughness is good, or making a little bit more rough, and add the effect to the fill layer. Add filter, add matte finished grainy. Good. And I will add a black mask this time to hold the object, and I will start to paint white the places I want some snow on them. So let's change my alpha of the brush. Let me see. I think it is good. I think. And I start to paint. Oh, I need some height. I need some height for this material. So I will select the material and I will change the height. Good. And I will start to paint in the mask. And some places like here. I will move it quickly. We can pay attention more during painting. There we go. And oh, these girders, I must select the girders again, and I will click on the paints. And start to make some place black. All right, it's enough. Alright guys, I explained how to paint an object in Substance Painter. I hope this tutorial be useful for all you guys, and the final step to export all your textures. For example, if you go to File and click on Export Textures, you have the export document. You can change your PBR metal raw formats that you gave in the template when you were opening your model the first time. You can change the config from PBR metal raw to other things, like for example you can set the exported textures to be compatible to V-Ray, for example. V-Ray, if you clicked on that and click for example on the matte 01 to open the subset of this, you will see for matte 01 you have diffuse, reflection, glossiness, IOR, height, normal, and emissive textures if you export it. And if you change it to other things, for example Unreal Engine 4, you have other formats of map that will be exported. And for PBR metal rough, let me go here, and for PBR metal rough you have base color, roughness, metallic, normal, height, and emissive output. You can change the output format from PNG to other forms. For example, it's wise to set it on JPEG to JPEG format, or you can change and you can set the place you want your texture to be exported, and here you can set the resolution of your final textures that will be exported. And in configurations you can change some parameters of these default forms. You can create other you can create your other preset, and here all the things I could explain in this tutorial. I hope this tutorial be useful for all you guys. If you have any questions, you can ask me by my email ali3dking@yahoo.com, or Instagram ali3dking, or Telegram ID of ali3dking. And you can create these objects. You can use it on your own scene. For example, I have used this object in my scene. As you see, if I show you my story, I have used some water tank like this in my scene. And as you see, all these snows are not meshes. These are painted in Substance Painter, and they are all textures with displacement maps. And I hope this tutorial was useful for you. Good luck.